Blood-red dust swirled around Abigail Turner's boots as she stared at the dilapidated sign swinging above the gilded Lily Saloon. The fading gold letters mocked her dreams of a respectable life. But in 1876, a 20-year-old widow with no family and empty pockets had precious few options in Weaverville, California. The mining town, nestled in the Trinity Alps, had devoured her husband in its gold-hungry depths 6 months ago, leaving her with nothing but a mountain of his gambling debts and a heart full of broken promises. "You coming in, or you planning to wear out my doorstep with all that standing?" The gravelly voice belonged to Sadie Miller, the saloon's madam, a woman whose hardened exterior masked what little kindness remained in her heart. Her rouge-stained cheeks crinkled into something resembling a smile. "I'm coming in," Abigail replied, squaring her shoulders. "I need work, Mrs. Miller, any work." Sadie's painted eyebrows arched. "Last time I offered, you said you'd sooner starve than work here." "That was before the landlord gave me until tomorrow to pay or leave." Abigail's fingers twisted the threadbare lace of her cuffs, her last decent dress, faded from washing but still presentable. "I can serve drinks, clean, whatever you need." Sadie's eyes, shrewd from years of sizing people up, studied Abigail's face. "The men would like you." "Pretty face, proper speech, they'll pay extra for that." Abigail swallowed hard. "Just serving drinks, Mrs. Miller, that's all I'm offering." A knowing smile spread across the older woman's face. "For now, perhaps. Come in then, the evening rush will start soon." The Gilded Lily's interior was dimmer than Abigail expected, smelling of whiskey, tobacco, and cheap perfume. A piano sat in the corner, its keys yellowed with age and use. 3 girls in varying states of undress lounged on velvet chairs, eyeing the newcomer with curiosity and suspicion. "Girls, this is Abigail. She'll be serving drinks," Sadie announced. "Ruby, show her the ropes." A redhead with freckles across her nose and shoulders pushed herself to her feet. She couldn't have been more than 18, though her eyes looked decades older. "Come on then," Ruby said, leading Abigail behind the bar. "First rule, don't ever pour a man's drink weak. Second rule, move fast when they grab at you. Third rule, always keep smiling no matter what they say." Abigail nodded, trying to commit everything to memory as Ruby showed her where the bottles were kept, how much to charge, and which customers were allowed credit. "What about that corner table?" Abigail asked. Noticing Ruby had skipped it in her explanation, Ruby's smile faltered. "That's where the men from the Keystone Mining Company sit. Mr. Blackwell's men. They get whatever they want whenever they want it. Don't argue, don't dawdle, and for God's sake, don't spill anything on them." "Blackwell owns half the town now," Abigail murmured, a chill running down her spine. William Blackwell had been her husband's gambling companion and the holder of most of his debts he now expected her to pay. "More than half," Ruby corrected. "And he comes in every Friday night to collect his cut from Sadie." She leaned closer. "Word is, he's looking for a new wife since his last one died. Fever, they say, but no one believes it." Before Abigail could respond, the batwing doors swung open and the first customers of the evening sauntered in. 3 dusty miners, followed by a pair of cowboys fresh off the trail. "Showtime," Ruby whispered. Abigail's first night passed in a blur of whiskey bottles, leering smiles and pinching fingers. By midnight, her feet ached, her cheeks hurt from forced smiling, and her wrists were mottled with red marks from where she'd wrenched them away from wandering hands. But her apron pocket jingled with more coins than she'd had in months. As she wiped down the bar, the doors swung open once more, admitting a tall figure silhouetted against the night. The saloon quieted momentarily as the man stepped into the lantern light. Dust coated his long coat, and a wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face. He moved with an easy confidence, not the swagger of the local cowboys or the heavy tread of the miners. He chose a corner table, removed his hat, and ran a hand through dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. His face was tanned from long days in the sun, with lines at the corners of his eyes suggesting he was in his early 30s. A faded scar crossed his left cheekbone, adding character rather than marring his features. "Who's that?" Abigail whispered to Ruby, who was arranging glasses. "Zachariah King. They call him the Ghost Rider because he appears and disappears like one. Runs cattle up north but comes through town every few months. Keeps to himself, doesn't cause trouble." Ruby's eyes gleamed appreciatively. "Handsome, isn't he, and not handsy like the others?" Abigail approached his table, notepad ready. "What can I get for you, sir?" His eyes, an unusual shade that seemed to shift between green and gold in the lamplight, assessed her with a quick, thorough glance. "Whiskey. No need for the watered-down stuff you serve the others." A flush rose to her cheeks. "I haven't been watering anything down." A slight smile touched his lips. "No, then Sadie's changing her ways." When she didn't reply, he added, "I haven't seen you here before." "First night," she admitted, then immediately regretted the disclosure. "I see." Something in his expression softened. "In that case, I'll have that whiskey and whatever information you can provide on William Blackwell's comings and goings." Abigail's breath caught. "I don't know anything about Mr. Blackwell." Zachariah studied her face. "Your eyes say otherwise, miss." "Turner, Abigail Turner." She shouldn't have given her real name, but something about his direct gaze made lying seem pointless. "Mrs. Turner," he corrected, noting the thin gold band she still wore. "Widow Turner," she clarified. 6 months now, understanding flickered across his face. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Don't be. My husband lost more than my grief can account for." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Zachariah leaned back, his expression unreadable. "That whiskey, Mrs. Turner, and perhaps we can continue this conversation later." Throughout the evening, Abigail felt his eyes following her. Not in the predatory way of the other men, but with a calculated interest that made her both nervous and curious. When the last drunken miner had been poured into the street and Ruby had taken a customer upstairs, Abigail found herself wiping tables near Zachariah's corner. "Why are you asking about Blackwell?" she ventured, keeping her voice low. "Why are you working in a saloon when your clothes and speech suggest you weren't born to it?" he countered. "Necessity." She straightened, looking him directly in the eye. "My husband died owing a great deal of money to various people, including William Blackwell. The mining claim turned out worthless and Daniel had gambled away everything else. And now Blackwell's pressuring you for payment." It wasn't a question, but she nodded anyway. "He suggested alternative arrangements." Zachariah's jaw tightened. "I'm sure he has." He drained his glass and stood, towering over her. "How much do you owe him?" $200, she answered, the impossible sum bitter on her tongue. He let out a low whistle. "That's quite a debt. One I'll never be able to repay on a saloon girl's wages. But it buys me time, and time is all I have now. Perhaps." He reached into his pocket and placed a gold coin on the table. "For your service tonight." "That's too much for a few drinks," she protested. "Consider it an investment." His eyes held hers for a moment longer than was comfortable. "I'll be back tomorrow night. We may have more to discuss." After he left, Abigail picked up the coin, a $20 gold piece, more money than she'd seen at once since Daniel died. She tucked it into her boot instead of the bars till, guilt warring with necessity, Sadie appeared beside her. "I see you've met the mysterious Mr. King." "He was just passing through," Abigail replied cautiously. "Men like him are always just passing through," Sadie said knowingly. "But they leave wreckage behind like a tornado. Remember that, girl." She patted Abigail's cheek with a heavily ringed hand. "You did well tonight. Go get some sleep. Tomorrow will be busier. It's payday at the mine." Abigail's rented room above the milliner's shop was small but clean. She counted her night's earnings by lantern light, nearly $30 including Zachariah's coin. At this rate, she might be able to pay off Blackwell in. She calculated quickly, only 7 months, if he would wait that long, if he didn't raise the interest, if. Sleep came fitfully. Dreams of Daniel's bloody body being pulled from the mine shaft mingling with Blackwell's cold eyes and, strangely, with Zachariah King's searching gaze. The next day dawned clear and hot, the California summer in full force. Abigail spent the morning mending her clothing and washing her hair, trying to make herself presentable without drawing too much unwanted attention. By late afternoon, she was back at the Gilded Lily, helping Ruby stock the bar. "You made quite an impression on the ghost rider," Ruby remarked, arranging glasses. "I hardly spoke to him," Abigail protested. "Exactly," Ruby grinned. "Most girls can't stop talking around a handsome man like that, makes them nervous." She leaned closer. "But be careful. Men who don't say much usually have the most to hide." As predicted, the saloon filled quickly as miners emerged from the depths of the Keystone, their pockets heavy with the week's wages. Abigail moved efficiently between tables, smiling and dodging wandering hands with practiced ease, despite having only one night's experience. Around 9 o'clock, the Batwing doors parted to admit William Blackwell and 3 of his men. The saloon didn't exactly fall silent, but the raucous laughter dimmed to a murmur. Blackwell was an imposing figure, tall and broad-shouldered, with a thick mustache waxed to precise points and eyes as cold as river stones. At 45, his hair remained black except for silver wings at his temples, giving him a distinguished appearance that belied his ruthlessness. "Mrs. Turner," he called, spotting her immediately. "A bottle of your finest and 5 glasses. Join me, won't you?" It wasn't a request. Abigail felt every eye in the room on her as she collected a bottle of the imported brandy Sadie kept for special customers and followed Blackwell to his usual table. "You look well," he said, his eyes traveling over her figure in a way that made her skin crawl. "This environment suits you better than I would have expected." "The work is honest," she replied, pouring his drink with a steady hand. "Honest," he chuckled, the sound devoid of humor. "Is that what we're calling it?" His hand captured her wrist as she finished pouring. "Have you considered my offer?" "I'm paying my debts as quickly as I can, Mr. Blackwell." His grip tightened. "At this rate, you'll be an old woman before they're settled. I'm offering you a comfortable home, fine clothes, and the protection of my name." "In exchange for becoming your wife," she stated flatly. "I've only been widowed 6 months. And such a tragic loss it was," he said with mock sympathy. "But practical concerns outweigh sentiment, my dear. Your reputation is already compromised by working here. I'm offering respectability." "I'll consider it," she said, the lie bitter on her tongue. "Don't consider too long. My patience has limits." He released her wrist, leaving red marks where his fingers had dug into her skin. As she turned away, the doors swung open once more, admitting Zachariah King. His eyes swept the room, landing on her, then shifting to Blackwell. Something dangerous flickered in his expression before it smoothed into careful neutrality. He chose the same corner table as the previous night, and Abigail approached, grateful for the excuse to move away from Blackwell. "Whiskey?" she asked. "And information," he replied, his voice low. "Has Blackwell been bothering you?" "No more than usual." She poured his drink, keeping her back to Blackwell's table. "Why are you so interested in him?" Zachariah took a slow sip before answering. "Let's just say we have unfinished business." "What kind of business?" His eyes met hers, measuring. "The kind that's best not discussed in crowded saloons." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded paper. "I'm staying at the hotel across the street, room 204. If you want to hear more, come by after your shift. Bring this with you, it will get you past the desk clerk without questions." Abigail hesitated, then took the paper, tucking it into her bodice. "I can't promise anything." "I'm not asking for promises, Mrs. Turner, just a conversation." Throughout the evening, Abigail felt caught between 2 powerful forces: Blackwell's cold stare and Zachariah's watchful presence. When Blackwell finally left around midnight, having conducted his business with Sadie in her private office, Abigail felt herself breathe easier. Zachariah departed soon after, tipping his hat to her on the way out. The folded paper seemed to burn against her skin, a temptation and a warning all at once. By 2 in the morning, the last customers had been shown the door. Abigail's feet throbbed and her head ached from the smoke and noise. She counted her earnings another good night. though not as profitable as the first, and said goodnight to Sadie and the girls. Outside, the night air was cool and clean after the stuffiness of the saloon. Weaverville lay mostly silent, with only a few lanterns still burning in windows. The hotel across the street glowed with lamplight, its front doors still open despite the late hour. Abigail hesitated at the bottom of the saloon steps. Going to a man's hotel room in the middle of the night would destroy what little reputation she had left. Yet something about Zachariah King intrigued her, his interest in Blackwell, his careful manners, the way he looked at her as though seeing beyond her circumstances to something beneath. Decision made, she crossed the street quickly, her boots silent on the packed dirt. The night clerk, a young man with thinning hair and spectacles, looked up from his ledger as she entered. "I have business with Mr. King," she said, presenting the folded paper. The clerk barely glanced at it before nodding. "Second floor, end of the hall." The hotel was modest but well-maintained, with a carpeted staircase and clean wallpaper. Abigail climbed the stairs slowly, her courage wavering with each step. What did she really know about this man? Only that he had some grudge against Blackwell, which could mean anything. Room 204 door was solid oak with a brass number plate. She knocked softly, half hoping he'd fallen asleep. Instead, the door opened almost immediately, revealing Zachariah in shirt sleeves and vest, his gun belt hanging on a chair nearby. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said, stepping back to let her enter. "Neither was I." Abigail remained near the door, taking in the room. It was sparsely furnished: a bed, a desk with papers spread across it, a washstand, and a single chair. A Winchester rifle leaned against the wall, and saddlebags sat at the foot of the bed. "What's this about, Mr. King?" Zachariah gestured to the chair. "Please sit. Would you like some water? I'm afraid I don't have anything stronger up here." "Water would be fine." She perched on the edge of the chair, watching as he poured from a pitcher on the washstand. "I should be direct," he said, handing her the glass. "I'm not just a cattle rancher. I work for the Pinkerton Detective Agency. We've been tracking William Blackwell for nearly 2 years now." Abigail nearly choked on her water. "A detective? What has Blackwell done? Besides intimidating widows and running half the businesses in town into the ground?" Zachariah's mouth twisted. "Murder, for one. His last wife didn't die of fever. And there's embezzlement from the mining company back east that owns the Keystone, fraud, and likely a stagecoach robbery that left 3 people dead last year. You can prove this, some of it, not all." He leaned against the desk, arms crossed. "That's where you come in, Mrs. Turner." Understanding dawned. "You want me to spy on him?" "I want your help bringing him to justice," Zachariah corrected. "You have access to information I don't. The saloon is where men talk, especially when they're drinking. And what do I get in return for risking my life?" Abigail asked, setting down her glass. "Because Blackwell would kill me if he suspected." $500 upon his arrest and conviction," Zachariah said without hesitation. "Enough to leave Weaverville and start fresh somewhere else, and my personal guarantee of your safety throughout." Abigail laughed without humor. "Pretty promises, Mr. King, but I've heard those before. I'm not your husband, Mrs. Turner." His voice was quiet but firm. "When I give my word, I keep it." "How do I know that you don't?" He straightened and moved to the window, pulling back the curtain to look at the empty street. "But consider your alternatives. Keep working at the saloon until Blackwell's patience runs out, accept his proposal and marry a murderer. Try to run with barely enough money to get to the next town." Each option sounded worse than the last when laid out so plainly. "What would I have to do?" "Listen. Report conversations. Let me know when Blackwell meets with his men or strangers. Occasionally pass messages or plant information." Zachariah turned back to her. "Nothing that would obviously implicate you?" Abigail weighed her options. The logical part of her brain screamed caution, but her instincts, which had been numbed since Daniel's death, suddenly flared to life. Here was a chance, dangerous though it might be, to escape the trap her life had become. "If I agree," she said slowly, "I want half the money up front, as insurance, Something like admiration flickered in his eyes. 200 now, 300 after, and this. He reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a small pistol barely larger than his palm. Daring her, 2 shots. Keep it hidden, use it only if absolutely necessary. She took the tiny weapon, surprised by its weight. Have you done this before, recruited civilians to help you? A few times, he admitted. Never someone in your position, though. And did they all survive? His expression sobered. Not all, no, I won't lie to you about the risks. Honesty, at least, more than Daniel had ever offered. When do we start? Tomorrow. I'll come to the saloon in the evening. We'll establish that we're becoming friendly. It will give us reason to talk regularly without arousing suspicion. Friendly, she repeated, understanding his implication. You want people to think we're involved. It's the simplest cover. 2 people finding comfort in each other's company isn't unusual, even in these circumstances. He was right, of course. Saloon girls often had regular customers who sought more than just drinks, but the thought of pretending such intimacy with this stranger made her face warm. If that makes you uncomfortable, Zachariah said, noticing her expression, we can find another approach. No, it makes sense. Abigail stood, straightening her skirts. But understand this, Mr. King, it will be pretend only. A smile touched his lips. Of course, Mrs. Turner, I'm a professional, not a scoundrel. Very well. She extended her hand businesslike. I accept your terms. His hand engulfed hers, warm and calloused. I'll get your payment together. Meet me behind the milliner's shop tomorrow at noon. We shouldn't be seen entering or leaving this room again. Too suspicious. Abigail nodded and moved to the door, the small pistol concealed in her pocket. Good night, Mr. King. Zachariah, he corrected. If we're to be friendly, you should use my given name. Zachariah, she repeated, the name feeling strange on her tongue. Then I suppose you should call me Abigail. Good night, Abigail. He opened the door, checking the hallway before letting her pass. Be careful. The walk back to her rented room was tense, every shadow seeming to hide one of Blackwell's men, but she reached her door without incident, locking it securely behind her. Sleep eluded her as she turned over her decision in her mind. Had she just made a terrible mistake or taken her first step toward freedom? The next day dawned foggy and cool, a brief respite from the summer heat. Abigail rose early, mind still churning with the previous night's revelations and decisions. She dressed carefully in her second-best dress, a faded blue cotton that had once been quite fashionable, and arranged her hair in a simple knot at the nape of her neck. At precisely noon, she made her way to the narrow alley behind the milliner's shop. Zachariah appeared moments later, looking more like a respectable businessman than a detective in a well-cut dark suit and polished boots. Good morning, he said, tipping his hat. No trouble last night? None. She glanced around nervously. Do you have? He withdrew an envelope from his inner pocket. $200, as agreed. Count it if you like. I trust you, she said, surprised to find she meant it. She tucked the envelope into her bodice, the weight of it both reassuring and terrifying. What now? Now we establish our story. He offered his arm. Walk with me. People should see us together in daylight, too. Abigail hesitated before placing her hand on his arm. Won't that seem unusual? A man like you with a saloon girl, a man like me. Amusement colored his voice. You know what I mean. You're clearly educated, well-dressed. I'm a woman fallen on hard times, he finished for her. But also clearly educated, well-spoken, and if you'll forgive my directness, beautiful enough to attract attention from any man with eyes. Our association won't raise eyebrows. The compliment, delivered so matter-of-factly, flustered her more than the crude remarks she'd endured at the saloon. If you say so. They walked slowly down the main street, past the general store, the barber shop, and the assayer's office. Abigail felt eyes following them, heard the whispers start. By evening, everyone in Weaverville would be discussing Zachariah King's interest in the new saloon girl. I've been asking around about Blackwell, Zachariah said quietly as they strolled. He's planning something big. There's a gold shipment coming through next week, nearly $50,000 worth, heading to the bank in Sacramento. You think he means to rob it? I'm almost certain of it, but I need details: when, how, who's involved. He squeezed her hand where it rested on his arm. That's where you come in. What if he doesn't discuss it at the saloon? He will. Men like Blackwell get overconfident. They believe they're untouchable. Zachariah's expression hardened. And he has every reason to feel that way in this town. The sheriff's in his pocket, half the businessmen are indebted to him, and most people are too afraid to stand against him. Yet you're not afraid, she observed. Something dark flickered across his face. I didn't say that. I'm cautious. There's a difference. He paused outside the general store. We should part here. I'll see you at the saloon tonight. Wait, she said, suddenly reluctant to end their conversation. How did you become a Pinkerton agent? You don't seem like the usual type. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. And what is the usual type in your experience? I don't know. More official looking, I suppose. That would make for a poor detective, wouldn't it? He tipped his hat. Until tonight, Abigail, she watched him walk away, his stride confident and unhurried. For the first time since Daniel's death, she felt a flicker of hope and something else, something she wasn't ready to name. The saloon was rowdier than usual that evening. A traveling gambler had set up at one of the back tables, attracting minors eager to test their luck. Abigail moved between tables, serving drinks and deflecting advances with practiced ease. She'd tied a ribbon in her hair, a small touch of femininity in the rough environment. Blackwell arrived earlier than usual, accompanied by 4 men Abigail didn't recognize. They wore the dust of the trail with hard eyes that assessed the room with professional scrutiny. Gunmen, she realized, not miners or businessmen, the kind of men who killed for money. Mrs. Turner, Blackwell called, his voice carrying above the piano music. Join us, won't you? She brought a bottle of whiskey to their table, keeping her expression pleasant with effort. Good evening, Mr. Blackwell. I haven't seen your friends before. Just passing through, one of the men said with a smile that never reached his eyes. Business associates of Mr. Blackwell's. From Sacramento, another added, his gaze lingering on her bodice. Sacramento. Where the gold shipment was headed. Abigail's pulse quickened. How fortunate that your business brings you to our little town, she said, pouring their drinks. Will you be staying long? Just until next Wednesday, Blackwell answered, watching her closely. Important matters to attend to. Wednesday, 6 days from now. She filed the information away, keeping her face neutral. Well, Weaverville isn't much for entertainment, but you'll find the Gilded Lily offers the best hospitality in Trinity County. So I've heard, the first man said, his hand brushing hers as she set down his glass. Perhaps you could show me just how hospitable later. Before she could formulate a response, the batwing doors swung open and Zachariah entered. His eyes found her immediately, narrowing slightly at the scene before him. Without hesitation, he strode to Blackwell's table. Evening, he said, nodding to the assembled men. Blackwell, your mining operation seems to be prospering. Those new stamps I heard arriving yesterday must have cost a pretty penny. Blackwell's expression remained pleasant, but his eyes hardened. Mr. King, I wasn't aware you had an interest in mining equipment. I have interests in many things, Zachariah replied, his gaze shifting to Abigail, including the finer attractions of Weaverville. The tension at the table was palpable. Abigail felt caught in a silent battle between 2 predators. Mrs. Turner was just serving us, Blackwell said, his hand possessively capturing her wrist. Perhaps you could find another girl to attend to you. Zachariah's smile never wavered. Actually, Mrs. Turner promised to join me for a drink once she finished with your party. Isn't that right, Abigail? The use of her given name raised eyebrows around the table. Blackwell's grip tightened painfully. I did, she confirmed, gently but firmly extracting her wrist from Blackwell's grasp. If you gentlemen don't need anything else. We need plenty, one of the strangers muttered, but it seems you're already spoken for. Blackwell's eyes moved between her and Zachariah, calculation evident in their depths. Another time, perhaps. Do enjoy your evening, Mrs. Turner. She followed Zachariah to his usual corner table, aware of Blackwell's gaze boring into her back. "That was dangerous," she murmured as she sat across from him. "Necessary," he countered, pouring them both small glasses of whiskey. "I needed to see who he's brought in." "Those men are hired guns from San Francisco. I recognize two of them from wanted posters. They mentioned staying until Wednesday and something about Sacramento." She kept her voice low, smiling as if they were sharing pleasantries. Zachariah nodded, his fingers brushing hers on the table, a casual touch that might look intimate to observers. "The gold shipment leaves the assayer's office Wednesday morning. They must be planning to hit it before it reaches the mountain pass. What will you do?" "Wire my superiors tomorrow, request backup." His thumb traced small circles on the back of her hand, the gesture surprisingly distracting. "But we need more details. Blackwell's too smart to go down for this alone. He'll have it arranged so the actual robbery can't be traced to him." "Unless someone testifies against him," Abigail suggested. "Precisely?" His eyes met hers. "Keep listening. See if you can get any of those men talking when they're in their cups. But be careful, they're dangerous, especially the one with the scar across his chin. That's Michael Dowd. He's wanted for 3 murders in Nevada." The evening progressed, with Zachariah remaining at his table and Abigail moving between customers. She made sure to return to him regularly, lingering longer each time, building the illusion of growing intimacy. For his part, Zachariah played his role perfectly attentive, occasionally touching her arm or hand, his eyes following her movements across the room. Near midnight, Blackwell approached their table. "I see you two are becoming well acquainted," he observed, his tone conversational though his eyes were cold. "Mrs. Turner is excellent company," Zachariah replied easily. "A rare find in a town like this." "Indeed." Blackwell's attention shifted to Abigail. "I hope you haven't forgotten our conversation, my dear. My offer remains open, though perhaps not indefinitely." "I haven't forgotten," she said, discomfort crawling along her spine at the possessiveness in his gaze. "Good," he smiled thinly. "Mr. King, I understand you're heading north soon. Cattle business must be attended to, I imagine." "Eventually," Zachariah agreed, revealing nothing. "Well, don't let us keep you in Weaverville too long. Small towns can become dangerous for men who overstay their welcome." With a tip of his hat, Blackwell returned to his men. "He's suspicious," Abigail whispered once he was out of earshot. "Good," Zachariah replied. "When men get suspicious, they make mistakes." He drained his glass and stood. "I should go. We've given them enough to talk about for one night." "Wait." She caught his sleeve. "What if I could get into his office? He keeps a desk at the back of the mercantile. He owns it now. There might be papers, plans." Zachariah's expression turned serious. "That's too risky. If you're caught, I won't be," she interrupted. "The shopkeeper's daughter owes me a favor." "I can get in after hours." He studied her face, conflict evident in his eyes. "It's not worth your life, Abigail." "My life isn't worth much as it stands," she countered. "At least this would mean something." After a long moment, he nodded. "Tomorrow night, I'll create a distraction if needed. But at the first sign of trouble, you get out. Understand?" "Understood." She felt a strange mix of fear and excitement at the prospect. "Good night, Zachariah." He hesitated, then leaned forward, placing a brief, gentle kiss on her cheek for show, she told herself, though her skin tingled where his lips had touched. "Good night, Abigail. Be careful." The next day passed slowly, anticipation building as Abigail prepared for her mission. She visited the mercantile in the afternoon, exchanging pleasantries with Mary, the shopkeeper's daughter, and casually mentioning needing fabric for mending after the store would be closed. "Papa leaves the side door unlocked until 9, Mary confided. "I'm usually there doing the books." "Just knock twice, then once." "You're an angel," Abigail said, genuinely grateful. "Hardly," Mary laughed. "But I haven't forgotten how you nursed me through that fever last winter when everyone else was afraid to come near. I owe you more than a late visit to the store." At the saloon that evening, Abigail found it difficult to concentrate. Blackwell was absent, but his men were there, drinking heavily and becoming increasingly bold with the girls. Zachariah arrived at 8, catching her eye briefly before taking his usual table. At 8:30, she approached him. "It's arranged, I'll go at 8:45. "I'll create a distraction if needed," he replied, his voice low. "Be quick, in and out, no more than 10 minutes. "I know." She straightened his collar unnecessarily, playing her part for anyone watching. "If I find anything, bring it to me at the hotel. Rooms changed 304 now, backstairs." He captured her hand, his expression intense. "Abigail, if anything feels wrong, anything at all, don't go through with it. There will be other opportunities." She nodded, touched by his concern. "I'll be careful." The Mercantile stood 2 buildings down from the saloon, its windows dark except for a faint light at the back. Abigail slipped out the saloon's side door at 8:45, heart hammering in her chest. The night air was cool against her flushed skin as she hurried down the alley. The side entrance to the Mercantile was exactly where Mary had described. Abigail knocked 2 quick taps followed by a single one, and the door opened almost immediately. "Come in quickly," Mary whispered, glancing nervously up and down the alley. Inside, the store smelled of coffee, leather, and the faint mustiness of fabric. Shelves of goods lined the walls, ghostly shapes in the dim light of Mary's single lantern. "I need to check something in Mr. Blackwell's office," Abigail explained, keeping her voice low. "Is it unlocked?" Mary's eyes widened. "His office? Abigail, that's important," Abigail finished. "Please, Mary, I wouldn't ask if it wasn't essential." After a moment's hesitation, Mary nodded. "It's through the storeroom at the back. The door sticks you have to pull up as you turn the handle. Papa and I never go in there unless specifically invited." She handed Abigail the lantern. 10 minutes, then I'll have to lock up." "Thank you." Abigail squeezed her friend's hand before making her way past stacked crates and barrels to the door at the rear of the storeroom. As Mary had warned, the door required a firm, upward tug while turning the handle. It opened with a faint creak, revealing a small but well-appointed office. A massive oak desk dominated the space, with a leather chair behind it and bookshelves lining one wall. The room smelled of pipe tobacco and expensive cologne. Abigail placed the lantern on the desk and began her search. The drawers were locked, but the blotter on top held several sheets of paper covered in numbers, accounts perhaps, or inventories. Nothing obviously related to a stagecoach robbery. She moved to a cabinet against the wall, carefully opening its doors. Inside were ledgers, neatly labeled by date. She pulled out the current month's book and flipped through it, finding nothing but ordinary business transactions. Time was running short. In frustration, she turned her attention to a smaller drawer in the desk, one with a different lock than the others. On impulse, she felt along the underside of the desk, her fingers encountering a small metal object taped to the wood. A key. With trembling hands, she removed it and tried it in the small drawer. The lock turned with a soft click. Inside lay a folded map, a small journal, and a telegram. Abigail spread the map across the desk, immediately recognizing the road between Weaverville and Reading. A red X marked a spot approximately halfway between the towns, with notations about time and positioning. The telegram was brief but damning. Shipment confirmed for Wednesday. Usual arrangements. It was signed only with the initial J. She quickly folded the map and telegram, tucking them into her bodice alongside the journal. As she closed the drawer and replaced the key, she heard voices in the main part of the store, male voices, one of which she recognized with chilling certainty as William Blackwell's. Extinguishing the lantern, Abigail pressed herself against the wall beside the door. The voices grew louder, approaching the storeroom. "Need to be ready by Tuesday night," Blackwell was saying. "The shipment leaves at dawn Wednesday. I want men positioned here, here, and here." There was a rustling of paper. "Dowd, you'll take point, Matthews and Cox on the flanks." "What about witnesses?" another voice asked. "No witnesses," Blackwell replied, the coldness in his tone making Abigail's blood freeze. "This needs to be clean." They were directly outside the office now. Abigail looked frantically around the dark room for an escape. The only window was small, high, and likely nailed shut. She was trapped, the office door handle turned. In desperation, Abigail dropped to the floor and rolled beneath the massive desk, pulling the chair in to shield herself from view. The door swung open and light flooded the room as someone entered with a lantern. "Wait here," Blackwell instructed someone in the storeroom. "This won't take long." From her hiding place, Abigail could see his polished boots as he moved around the desk. He set the lantern down and unlocked the main drawer with a key from his vest pocket. Papers rustled as he searched for something. "Damn it," he muttered. "Where is it?" He tried the smaller drawer next, the one Abigail had just locked. Finding it secured, he reached under the desk for the hidden key directly above where she crouched, barely breathing, the stolen documents pressed against her chest. His hand groped along the underside of the desk, inches from her face. She pressed back against the knee space, praying the shadows would conceal her. "Jones," Blackwell called. "Did you move anything in my office today?" A muffled response came from the storeroom. "The key's missing from under the desk," Blackwell said, his voice tight with anger. "And I specifically told you no one is to enter this room without me." Another response, apologetic in tone, "Find Mary. Now." Blackwell's boots moved away from the desk toward the door. "And bring my tools from the saddlebag." The door closed, leaving Abigail in darkness once more. She knew she had moments at most before they returned. Sliding from beneath the desk, she crept to the door and pressed her ear against it. Voices in the storeroom indicated at least 2 men still present. The window was her only option. It was set high in the wall, probably 6 feet up. Quietly, she dragged the chair beneath it and climbed up. The window was indeed nailed shut, but the wood around it was old and soft. Using a letter opener from the desk, she pried at the frame until one side loosened enough to push outward. The opening was small, barely large enough for her to squeeze through, but it was her only chance. Footsteps approached the office once more. With desperate strength, Abigail pulled herself up and through the window, tearing her dress and scraping her arms in the process. She landed hard in the alley behind the mercantile, the breath knocked from her lungs. For a moment, she lay stunned, then scrambled to her feet as a shout came from inside the building. They'd discovered her escape route. Running blindly in the darkness, Abigail rounded the corner of the building and collided with a solid form. Strong hands gripped her arms to steady her. "Abigail," Zachariah's voice urgent but quiet. "What happened?" "Blackwell," she gasped. "In the store, he knows someone was in his office." Without another word, Zachariah pulled her into the shadows between buildings. They moved quickly through the maze of alleys, away from the mercantile and the sounds of pursuit. Only when they reached the back entrance of the hotel did he slow, checking to ensure they weren't followed. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his eyes scanning her torn dress and scratched arms. "Nothing serious." She withdrew the folded papers from her bodice with shaking hands. "I found these, a map of the robbery site, a telegram confirming the shipment, and some kind of journal." Zachariah took the documents, his expression grim. "You're lucky to be alive. If they'd caught you, but they didn't," she interrupted. "And now we have proof." "It's not enough for a conviction," he warned as they climbed the back stairs to his room. "But it's enough to stop the robbery and maybe get Blackwell to incriminate himself." Inside his room, Abigail sank onto the edge of the bed, the adrenaline that had carried her through the escape beginning to ebb. Zachariah lit the lamp and examined her injuries more closely. "These need cleaning," he said, retrieving a flask of whiskey and a clean handkerchief from his saddlebag. "This will sting." She winced as the alcohol touched her abraded skin but didn't pull away. "Mary the shopkeeper's daughter, they'll question her." "She didn't see you take anything, did she?" "No, but she let me into the store." Zachariah's hands paused in their ministrations. "I'll arrange for her protection if needed, but first we need to get you somewhere safe. Blackwell will be looking for you." "I have nowhere to go," Abigail said, reality crashing down around her. My room above the milliner's shop will be the first place they look. You can't stay at the saloon either. Zachariah paced the small room, thinking. There's a widow who lives at the edge of town, Mrs. Beckett. She's taken in fugitives before, people running from Blackwell. I helped her son escape a false robbery charge last year. Will she take me in tonight with no warning? She will. His confidence reassured her, but we need to move quickly. Blackwell's men will be searching the town. As if in confirmation of his words, shouting erupted in the street below. Zachariah moved to the window, carefully parting the curtains. They're organizing a search. We need to leave now, out the back. He gathered his essential belongings, strapping on his gun belt and slinging his rifle over his shoulder. The map shows they plan to ambush the stage at Cooper's Ridge. It's the perfect spot, steep drop on one side, forest on the other, no escape route for the driver. When will your backup arrive? Abigail asked, accepting his help in standing. Her legs felt surprisingly weak. Not soon enough if the robbery's planned for Wednesday morning. He checked the hallway before leading her toward the back stairs. I need to get word to the stage company to delay the shipment or change the route. They descended silently, emerging into the dark alley behind the hotel. Weaverville was in an uproar, with lanterns bobbing along the main street and men calling to one another as the search spread outward from the mercantile. Stay close, Zachariah murmured, leading her away from the commotion. They skirted the edge of town, keeping to the shadows and freezing whenever search parties came near. The widow's house was a small cabin set apart from its neighbors, with a well-tended garden and smoke curling from its chimney despite the warm evening. Zachariah knocked softly 3 quick taps followed by 2 slower ones. The door opened almost immediately, revealing a gray-haired woman with kind eyes and a wary expression. "Mr. King," she said, her gaze shifting to Abigail. "I thought I might be seeing you tonight." "The whole town's in an uproar. Mrs. Beckett, this is Abigail Turner. She needs a safe place to stay just for tonight." The older woman's eyes narrowed slightly as she assessed Abigail. "The saloon girl Blackwell's men are tearing the town apart to find?" "Yes," Abigail admitted. "But I'm not what they think." Mrs. Beckett studied her for a moment longer, then stepped back from the doorway. "Come in, quickly. They've already been by once, but they might return." The cabin's interior was simple but comfortable, with a stone fireplace, 2 rocking chairs, and a small table set with a single plate and cup. A curtained doorway presumably led to a bedroom. "Thank you," Abigail said, the enormity of the night's events suddenly overwhelming her. "I'm sorry to bring trouble to your door. Trouble and I are old acquaintances," Mrs. Beckett replied with a grim smile. "Anyone Blackwell wants found is welcome under my roof." She turned to Zachariah. "Will you be staying as well?" He shook his head. "I need to get a message to Reading about the gold shipment. The sooner it's delayed, the better." "The telegraph office is closed," Mrs. Beckett pointed out. "I know, I'll have to ride." He glanced at Abigail, concern evident in his eyes. "I'll be back by morning. Stay inside, away from windows." "Mrs. Beckett knows what to do if there's trouble." The older woman patted a shotgun propped beside the door. "Indeed I do." Zachariah moved to leave, then hesitated. With a quick step, he returned to Abigail and took her hand. "You were brave tonight," he said quietly. "Reckless, but brave." "Be careful," she replied, suddenly afraid for him. "Blackwell's men will be watching the roads. I've avoided worse than Blackwell's thugs." He squeezed her hand once before releasing it. "I'll see you tomorrow." After he'd gone, Mrs. Beckett led Abigail to the bedroom. "You can sleep here." "I'll take the chair by the fire. I don't sleep much these days anyway." "I couldn't possibly." "Nonsense," the older woman interrupted. "You look ready to collapse. There's a nightgown on the bed. Get some rest while you can." Too exhausted to argue further, Abigail changed into the borrowed nightgown and slipped between the clean, lavender-scented sheets. Despite her racing thoughts and the distant sounds of the search continuing in town, sleep claimed her almost immediately. She woke to sunlight streaming through the small window and the smell of coffee. For a moment, she couldn't place her surroundings, then the previous night's events came rushing back. Dressing quickly in her torn and dirty clothes from the day before, she emerged from the bedroom to find Mrs. Beckett at the stove frying bacon. "Good morning," the older woman said without turning around. "You slept like the dead." "What time is it?" "Just past 9. No sign of Mr. King yet, but that's not surprising. It's a hard ride to Reading and back." Abigail accepted a cup of coffee gratefully. "Have they stopped searching?" "For now. They were still at it when dawn broke, but they've gone quiet since. Blackwell's probably regrouping, planning his next move." Mrs. Beckett placed a plate of bacon and biscuits on the table. "Eat. You'll need your strength." "Did you know my husband?" Abigail asked suddenly. Daniel Turner. Mrs. Beckett's expression softened slightly. "I knew of him. A handsome man with a gambling problem and more charm than sense from what I heard." "That was Daniel," Abigail agreed with a sad smile. "He promised me the world and delivered mostly heartache." "Men often do, my dear." The older woman sat across from her. "My Thomas was the same, full of grand plans that never quite materialized. Died in that mine same as your husband, chasing gold that was never there." "Yet you stayed in Weaverville." "Where else would I go? This is my home, despite Blackwell and his kind." Mrs. Beckett poured herself coffee. "But you're young. You have time to start over somewhere else." "If we succeed in stopping Blackwell," Abigail said, uncertainty creeping into her voice. "Mr. King seems determined, and he's not a man who fails often from what I've seen." Mrs. Beckett's eyes twinkled suddenly. "He's quite taken with you, you know." Abigail felt heat rise in her cheeks. "It's just for show, to explain why we're often together, part of the investigation." "If you say so." The older woman didn't look convinced. "But I've seen his type before. Once they give their heart, it's for keeps." Before Abigail could formulate a response, a soft knock came at the door, the same pattern Zachariah had used the night before. Mrs. Beckett rose to answer it, shotgun in hand, until she confirmed their visitor's identity. Zachariah looked exhausted, his face stubbled and dust coating his clothes, but his eyes were alert. "It's done," he said as he entered, removing his hat. "The shipment's been rerouted. It will go by train from Reading, bypassing the stage route entirely." "You made it to Reading and back in one night?" Abigail asked, impressed despite her concern at his haggard appearance. "Had to change horses twice." He accepted the coffee Mrs. Beckett pressed into his hands. "The telegraph lines between here and Reading have been cut. Blackwell's work, no doubt, to prevent exactly what I was trying to do." "So the robbery is foiled," Abigail said with relief. "For now." Zachariah sat heavily at the table. "But we still need to catch Blackwell in the act if we want him convicted, and now he knows someone's onto him. He'll suspect me," she realized, "after finding his office disturbed." "Yes." Zachariah's expression darkened. "Which is why you need to leave Weaverville today." "I've arranged passage on the afternoon stage to Shasta. From there you can take the train to Sacramento." "Leave?" Abigail stared at him in disbelief. "But what about our plan? The money you promised is right here." He withdrew an envelope from his coat. $300 plus the $200 I gave you earlier, enough to start fresh somewhere safe." She made no move to take the envelope. "You're sending me away." "I'm keeping you alive," he corrected, his voice gentle but firm. "Blackwell won't stop looking for you here. And when the robbery fails, he'll be even more dangerous." "But you'll be in danger too," she protested. "He'll suspect you helped me. I can handle myself." Zachariah's smile didn't reach his eyes. "This isn't my first dangerous assignment." Mrs. Beckett cleared her throat. "I'll give you two a moment," she said, disappearing into her bedroom and closing the curtain. Alone with Zachariah, Abigail felt a strange mixture of anger and something else, something that made her heart race when she met his tired eyes. "I don't want to go," she said quietly. "Not yet." "Abigail, no, listen to me." She leaned forward, her hands flat on the table between them. "I've spent the last 6 months being afraid, being pushed around, having others decide my fate. For the first time, I'm doing something that matters. I helped find evidence against Blackwell. I can help catch him too." Zachariah ran a hand through his dust-streaked hair. "It's too dangerous." Life is dangerous, she countered. Especially for a woman alone, at least this danger has purpose. What are you suggesting? That you stay and continue spying on Blackwell, even though he suspects someone betrayed him. Zachariah shook his head. He'd kill you the moment he confirmed his suspicions. Not if he believes I'm ignorant of his plans. Abigail's mind raced ahead. What if I return to the saloon, claim I spent the night with a customer? Blackwell knows I've been friendly with you, it would explain my absence. And the documents missing from his office, I never saw them, I was with you all night. She reached across the table to grasp his hand. It could work, Zachariah. He's arrogant enough to believe a saloon girl couldn't possibly be involved in something like this. He was silent for a long moment, studying her face. You're either the bravest woman I've ever met or the most foolhardy. Perhaps both, she admitted with a small smile. Zachariah sighed deeply. If we try this, you'll need to be extremely careful, no more sneaking into offices or taking risks. You listen, you observe, you report to me, nothing more. Hope surged within her. Agreed. And at the first sign Blackwell suspects you get on that stage to Shasta. No arguments. I promise. He still looked unconvinced. Blackwell proposed marriage to you. He might expect an answer soon, especially if he's planning to leave town after the robbery. I'll tell him I'm considering his offer, Abigail said, though the thought made her stomach turn. It will keep him interested enough to talk freely around me. I don't like this, Zachariah muttered. I know. She squeezed his hand before releasing it, but it's my choice, my life. Their eyes held for a long moment, and something unspoken passed between them, an understanding, a connection deeper than their brief acquaintance should allow. Zachariah broke the contact first, standing abruptly. I need to send another wire, let my superiors know about the changed situation. He placed the envelope of money on the table. Keep this with you just in case. I will. He moved to the door, pausing with his hand on the latch. Return to the saloon this afternoon. Act normal, maybe a little embarrassed about spending the night away. I'll come by this evening, continue our arrangement. The way he hesitated over the last word made Abigail wonder if he too was finding it increasingly difficult to separate their pretend relationship from the real feelings developing between them. Until tonight, then, she said. After he'd gone, Mrs. Beckett emerged from the bedroom. That man would walk through fire for you, she observed casually. He's just doing his job, Abigail replied, not meeting the older woman's knowing gaze. If you say so, dear. If you say so. Returning to the saloon that afternoon was one of the hardest things Abigail had ever done. She'd borrowed a clean dress from Mrs. Beckett, a simple brown calico that was slightly too large but far better than her torn clothing from the previous night. She'd also scraped together a story about staying with a customer, one she hoped Sadie would believe without too many questions. The Gilded Lily was quiet when she entered through the back door, with only Ruby sweeping the main floor and Sadie tallying receipts at the bar. Well, look what the cat dragged in, Sadie drawled, looking up from her ledger. Decided to grace us with your presence after all. I'm sorry, Abigail said, attempting to look contrite. I should have sent word. Damn right you should have. Sadie's sharp eyes took in the borrowed dress and Abigail's nervous posture. That cowboy of yours must be something special to make you forget your obligations here. So they'd assumed she was with Zachariah. Good. It won't happen again, Abigail promised. See that it doesn't. I'm running a business, not a matchmaking service. Sadie returned to her ledger. Though I suppose I can't blame you. He's easy enough on the eyes and better mannered than most who come through those doors. Ruby sidled over, eyes bright with curiosity. So, what's he like, you know? She made a suggestive gesture that brought heat to Abigail's cheeks. A lady doesn't discuss such things, Abigail replied primly, then softened it with a small smile. But I have no complaints, Ruby giggled. I knew it, the quiet ones are always the most passionate. That's enough gossip, Sadie interrupted. There's work to be done. Abigail, the glasses need polishing and the floor behind the bar needs scrubbing. Ruby, finish sweeping, then help me with the inventory. Grateful for the mundane tasks that allowed her to collect her thoughts, Abigail set to work. As she polished glasses, she rehearsed what she would say if Blackwell questioned her about the previous night. The truth, as far as anyone needed to know, was that she'd spent the evening with Zachariah King. No mention of stolen documents or midnight escapes. The afternoon passed slowly, tension building in Abigail's shoulders as she waited for Blackwell to appear. But it was Zachariah who arrived first, shortly after the saloon opened for the evening. He looked refreshed, having apparently found time to rest and clean up since their morning meeting. "Evening, ladies," he greeted, tipping his hat to Sadie and Ruby before his eyes settled on Abigail. The warmth in his gaze seemed genuine enough to make her heart skip. "Your usual, Mr. King?" she asked, maintaining the pretense of a professional relationship despite the knowing looks exchanged by Sadie and Ruby. "Please." He followed her to his corner table, taking his seat with a casual grace that belied the dangerous game they were playing. As she poured his whiskey, he asked quietly, "Any trouble?" "Not yet," she murmured. "No sign of Blackwell. He's likely regrouping, planning his next move." Zachariah's fingers brushed hers as he accepted the glass. "Remember, if he questions you, I was with you all night," she finished. "I know." Their eyes held for a moment longer than necessary, and Abigail was startled to realize how easy it was becoming to play this role. Perhaps because it wasn't entirely a role anymore. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. She had just returned to the bar when the batwing doors swung open to admit William Blackwell. He was alone, impeccably dressed as always, but there was a tightness around his eyes that betrayed his anger. "Mrs. Turner," he said, his voice carrying across the now quiet saloon. "I was hoping to find you here, Mr. Blackwell." She kept her voice steady with effort. "Your usual brandy, please." He took a seat at the bar, his eyes never leaving her face as she poured his drink. "You disappeared rather suddenly last night. I was concerned." "That's very kind of you," she replied, sliding the glass toward him. "But as you can see, I'm perfectly well. Indeed." His gaze flicked briefly toward Zachariah's table. "I stopped by your lodgings this morning thinking you might be ill. Your landlady said you hadn't returned home all night." Abigail forced herself to meet his eyes. "I wasn't aware I needed to report my whereabouts to you, Mr. Blackwell." A muscle twitched in his jaw. "Of course not. But given our discussions about your future, I thought we had an understanding." "I'm still considering your offer," she said, the lie bitter on her tongue. "But I'm not your wife yet, and how I spend my evenings is my own affair." His hand shot out, capturing her wrist in a painfully tight grip. "Be careful, my dear," he said softly. "Weaverville can be dangerous for a woman with no protection. Accidents happen." "Let go of me," she said evenly, though her heart hammered against her ribs. For a tense moment she thought he might refuse. Then a shadow fell across the bar as Zachariah approached. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his tone conversational though his eyes were hard. Blackwell released Abigail's wrist, his smile never reaching his eyes. "Not at all. Mrs. Turner and I were just discussing business matters." "Looked like you were hurting her," Zachariah observed. "A misunderstanding." Blackwell stood, straightening his jacket. "Mrs. Turner knows I only have her best interests at heart." He turned to Abigail. "We'll continue our conversation soon, perhaps tomorrow. I have a proposition that might interest you." "Tomorrow," she agreed, rubbing her wrist where red marks were already forming. With a tip of his hat to Zachariah, a gesture more threatening than polite, Blackwell departed, leaving the saloon without having touched his drink. "Are you all right?" Zachariah asked once Blackwell was gone. "Yes." She tried to steady her trembling hands. "He suspects something, but he doesn't know what." "He mentioned a proposition for tomorrow," Zachariah said, concern evident in his voice. "What do you think he's planning?" "I don't know." Abigail glanced toward the door, half expecting Blackwell to return. "But whatever it is, it might be our chance to get concrete evidence against him." Zachariah's expression darkened. "Or it might be a trap. Blackwell's not a man to cross, Abigail, if he suspects you took those documents." He would have acted already, she reasoned. He's too arrogant to believe a woman could outwit him. More likely he thinks one of his men betrayed him, or perhaps he suspects Mary. I hope you're right. Zachariah leaned closer, his voice dropping. My backup should arrive tomorrow, 2 other agents. Once they're here, we can move against Blackwell with or without additional evidence. Relief washed over her. Then it's almost over. Almost, he agreed. Just be careful for one more day. The rest of the evening passed uneventfully, though Abigail felt eyes on her from every direction. News of her confrontation with Blackwell had spread quickly through the small town, and customers watched her with renewed interest. Some offered sympathy, others crude propositions, assuming her availability now that she had apparently fallen from Blackwell's favor. Zachariah remained at his table until closing time, creating the impression that he was waiting to accompany her home again. When the last customer had left and the girls had retired upstairs, Sadie approached them. You're playing a dangerous game, she said without preamble. Blackwell doesn't like losing, especially to a drifter. I'm not playing any game, Zachariah replied calmly. I simply enjoy misses. Turner's company, Sadie snorted. Enjoy it somewhere else after tomorrow. Blackwell's made it clear either she accepts his proposal or he'll collect her husband's debt in full, immediately. Abigail's blood ran cold. He said this to you this afternoon while you were out. Sadie's expression softened slightly. I've seen his type before, girl. He won't take rejection well, especially after you've been flaunting your association with Mr. King here. I'll handle Blackwell, Zachariah said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Will you now? Sadie looked unimpressed. And how exactly will a cattle driver stand against the most powerful man in the county? I have resources, he replied enigmatically. Sadie studied him for a long moment, then shrugged. Your funeral, but leave my saloon out of it. I've worked too hard to build this place to have it destroyed in some man's vendetta. She turned to Abigail. Be here by noon tomorrow. Blackwell wants to meet with you privately. I'll be here, Abigail promised, though dread settled in her stomach like a stone. After Sadie retired upstairs, Zachariah escorted Abigail back to her lodgings above the milliner's shop. The night was quiet, stars scattered across the velvet sky like diamonds on black cloth. I don't like this, Zachariah said as they walked slowly down the empty street. Meeting Blackwell alone is too risky. It might be our best chance to get information, Abigail countered. If he thinks I'm considering his proposal, he might let something slip about his plans. Or he might have discovered you were in his office and is planning to eliminate a liability. Zachariah's hand moved to rest on his holstered pistol. At least let me be nearby in case things go wrong. The saloon will be empty at noon except for Sadie, and she'll be watching like a hawk. Abigail sighed. But yes, if you can find a way to be close without being seen, I'd feel safer. They reached the narrow staircase leading to her room. Zachariah glanced up at the darkened window, then back at her. I'll walk you up. The small room was undisturbed, exactly as she'd left it the previous morning. Abigail lit the lamp, casting warm light over the sparse furnishings: a narrow bed, a washstand, a small table with a single chair. It's not much, she said, suddenly self-conscious of the room's plainness. It's clean, safe. Zachariah removed his hat, running a hand through his hair. Better than many places I've stayed. An awkward silence fell between them. Outside their pretend romance, in the privacy of her room, Abigail wasn't sure how to act with him. The connection she felt wasn't part of their charade, but was it real or simply born of danger and proximity? I should go, Zachariah said, moving toward the door. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be challenging. Wait, she caught his arm. I thank you for everything you've done, for believing in me when you had no reason to. His expression softened. You gave me reason enough. His hand came up to gently touch her cheek. Courage like yours is rare, Abigail, especially in circumstances like these. The simple touch sent warmth spreading through her. Without thinking, she leaned into his hand, her eyes meeting his. Something shifted in his gaze, caution giving way to something deeper, more personal. Abigail, he murmured, her name a question and a warning all at once. She answered by closing the distance between them, pressing her lips to his. For a heartbeat, he remained still, then his arms came around her, drawing her against him as he returned the kiss with unexpected tenderness. When they parted, both breathing a little faster, he rested his forehead against hers. "This complicates things." "I know," she whispered. "I seem to be making a habit of complicating your investigation." A smile touched his lips. "I'm not complaining." His expression grew serious. "But tomorrow I'll meet with Blackwell," she finished for him, "and we'll end this one way or another." He kissed her once more, briefly but with a promise of something more. "Lock the door behind me," he instructed. "I'll see you in the morning." After he'd gone, Abigail secured the door and leaned against it, her fingers touching her lips where the warmth of his kiss lingered. Despite the danger awaiting her tomorrow, she felt strangely at peace. Whatever happened with Blackwell, she was no longer alone. Morning arrived with a clarity that seemed at odds with the tension building within Abigail. She dressed carefully in her best remaining dress, a deep blue that brought out the color of her eyes, and arranged her hair in a simple but elegant knot at the nape of her neck. If she was to face William Blackwell, she would do so looking her best. The saloon was indeed empty when she arrived shortly before noon, though signs of preparation for the evening's business were evident. Glasses gleamed on shelves behind the bar, and fresh sawdust had been scattered across the floor to absorb spills and tobacco juice. Sadie looked up from her ledger as Abigail entered. "You're early," she observed. "Eager to seal your fate." "I haven't made any decisions yet," Abigail replied, removing her shawl and hanging it on a hook by the door. "Smart girl." Sadie closed her ledger with a snap. "Blackwell's not a bad catch, all things considered. Wealthy, influential, not as rough as some, but once he owns you, he'll never let go. Remember that before you say yes." "I will," Abigail promised, touched by the older woman's concern despite her gruff manner. At precisely noon, the batwing doors swung open to admit William Blackwell. He was dressed in a tailored suit of charcoal gray, a gold watch chain gleaming across his waistcoat. His mustache was freshly waxed and his boots polished to a mirror shine. "Mrs. Turner," he greeted her with a small bow. "Thank you for meeting me, Mr. Blackwell." She inclined her head slightly, determined to show neither fear nor eagerness. "Sadie, if you wouldn't mind giving us some privacy," Blackwell requested, though his tone made it clear it wasn't a request at all. With a significant look at Abigail, Sadie retreated upstairs, her footsteps echoing in the quiet saloon. Blackwell gestured to a table. "Shall we sit?" Abigail took a seat, arranging her skirts carefully. Blackwell remained standing, his eyes assessing her with a thoroughness that made her skin crawl. "You look lovely today," he said finally. "Blue suits you." "Thank you." She folded her hands on the table, willing them not to tremble. "You wanted to discuss a proposition, direct as always." He smiled, revealing teeth too perfect to be natural. "One of the qualities I admire in you, my dear." He pulled out a chair and sat opposite her. "I'll be equally direct. I want you to become my wife, not in a month, not after some extended courtship, but immediately, today, in fact." Surprise momentarily robbed her of speech. "Today, but why the urgency? Business requires me to leave Weaverville for a time," he explained smoothly. "I may be away for several months. I'd prefer to have our arrangement settled before I go." The robbery, she realized. If it failed, he planned to disappear until the investigation died down. If it succeeded, he would take his ill-gotten gains and establish himself elsewhere, somewhere his reputation was untarnished. "This is sudden," she said, playing for time. "I've been considering your offer, of course, but marriage is a serious commitment. Indeed it is." Blackwell reached across the table to take her hand. His fingers were soft, uncalloused, the hands of a man who ordered others to do his physical labor. "But your situation is precarious, my dear. Your husband's debts remain unpaid. Your employment here is." He glanced around the saloon with distaste, "hardly suitable for a woman of your background and education." "And as your wife, you would want for nothing," he promised. A fine house in Sacramento, servants, beautiful clothes. You would be the envy of society women who now would not deign to speak to you. It was a tempting picture, especially for a woman who had known nothing but struggle since her husband's death. If Abigail hadn't known of Blackwell's crimes, hadn't experienced his cruelty firsthand, she might even have been swayed. "And my husband's debts?" she asked. "Forgiven entirely, of course." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, an echo of Zachariah's gentle touch that now felt like a violation. "You would begin anew with no shadows from the past. It's a generous offer." She extracted her hand from his grasp, using the pretext of smoothing her hair. "But I would need time to consider. Time is the one thing I cannot give you," Blackwell interrupted, his voice hardening slightly. "I leave tomorrow, either as my wife or not at all. Tomorrow, the day the stage robbery was planned. So soon, business waits for no man, my dear." His smile returned, though it didn't reach his eyes. "The minister is expecting us at 2 o'clock. I've taken the liberty of purchasing a suitable dress for the occasion, nothing extravagant, given the haste, but befitting your new station." Anger flared within her at his presumption. "And if I decline, then I would be forced to collect your husband's debt in full, immediately." The threat hung in the air between them, "and I'm afraid your current employment and lodgings would become untenable." "You would ruin me completely," she stated flatly. "Business is business," he replied without a hint of remorse. "Though I would regret the necessity." Abigail stood, needing to move to think. Blackwell watched her with the patience of a predator certain of its prey. She had to stall him, to keep him in Weaverville until Zachariah's backup arrived and the attempted robbery provided evidence of his crimes. "I need an hour," she said finally, "to gather my things and prepare myself." Blackwell's expression darkened. "To say goodbye to your cowboy, you mean?" "To say goodbye to my old life," she corrected, meeting his gaze steadily. "If I am to be your wife, I should enter the marriage with a clear conscience and no unfinished business." For a moment she thought he would refuse, then he nodded, standing to tower over her once more. 1 hour. "I'll send my carriage at 1 o'clock to collect you and your belongings. Don't disappoint me, Abigail." The use of her given name coming from his lips made her shudder inwardly. "I'll be ready." With a satisfied nod, Blackwell departed, leaving her alone in the silent saloon. The moment the doors swung shut behind him, Abigail sagged against the bar, her knees weak with relief and tension. Well, that was a pretty performance. Abigail whirled to find Zachariah emerging from the storage room behind the bar. "You were here the whole time." "Close enough to put a bullet in him if he'd touched you wrong," he confirmed, his expression grim. "So he's leaving tomorrow. The robbery must be set for early morning. We need to stop him," Abigail said, her mind racing. "If he marries me today and leaves town tomorrow, he won't be marrying you," Zachariah interrupted, his voice hard. "That's not happening, Abigail." The conviction in his tone warmed her despite the dire circumstances. "What do we do?" "Your backup won't arrive until this afternoon," you said. "They're already here." He moved to the window, checking the street before speaking again. "They arrived on the morning stage. Right now, they're positioning themselves to intercept Blackwell's men at Cooper's Ridge. When Blackwell gives the final order to proceed, we'll have him." "But I'm supposed to meet his carriage in an hour," Abigail pointed out. "If I don't appear, he'll know something's wrong," Zachariah finished. "Which is why you need to leave Weaverville now, today. My men will escort you to Reading, where you'll be safe until this is over." "No." The word escaped her before she could consider its implications. "I've come this far, I want to see it through." Zachariah crossed the room to stand before her, his hands gently gripping her shoulders. "Abigail, listen to me. Blackwell is cornered, which makes him more dangerous than ever." "If he suspects you've betrayed him, he doesn't," she insisted. "He thinks I'm just a helpless widow he can bully into marriage. And when you don't appear for that marriage, when his men fail to secure the gold shipment, he'll put the pieces together quickly." His grip tightened. "I won't risk your life." The concern in his eyes touched her deeply, but Abigail had spent too long letting others, her father, her husband, Blackwell, make decisions for her. "It's not your risk to take," she said quietly but firmly. "It's mine." Zachariah studied her face, conflict evident in his expression. "You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met," he said finally, a reluctant smile tugging at his lips. "So you've mentioned." She covered his hands with hers where they still rested on her shoulders. "I have a suggestion. What if I appear to accept Blackwell's proposal, but delay the actual ceremony? I could insist on having time to dress properly, to visit the church beforehand for prayer, anything to keep him occupied until your men confirm the robbery attempt." Zachariah considered this. It might work. "But you'd be alone with him, vulnerable." "Not alone," she corrected. "You'll be nearby, and Blackwell won't harm his bride before the wedding. He's too concerned with appearances." After a long moment, Zachariah nodded. "All right, but we establish signals. If you're in danger, if you need me for any reason, you find a way to let me know." "Agreed." Relief washed through her. "What's the plan for stopping the robbery?" "My men will intercept Blackwell's gang at the ridge, but they'll allow one to escape to return to Weaverville with news of the failure. When Blackwell receives that news, we'll have witnesses to his reaction, hopefully including incriminating statements. And I'll be with him when it happens," Abigail realized. "A witness." "Exactly." Zachariah's expression was grim. "But it's risky. Blackwell might lash out when he learns his plans have failed." "I can handle William Blackwell," she said with more confidence than she felt. "I've been handling difficult men all my life." Zachariah's smile was both sad and admiring. "I believe you." He glanced at the clock behind the bar. "You should go prepare. Pack whatever you value. When this is over, we'll need to move quickly." "We." The word hung between them, full of unspoken questions. "If you want," he said, suddenly looking less sure of himself. "When this is finished, I'm due for a break from Pinkerton work. I was thinking of heading north, maybe settling for a while in Oregon. It's beautiful country." He paused. "It might be a good place for someone looking to start fresh." Understanding dawned. "Are you asking me to go with you?" "I'm suggesting it might be an option if you were interested." He met her eyes, vulnerability evident in his gaze. "I know we've known each other less than a week, and these aren't normal circumstances," but Abigail silenced him with a kiss, rising on her tiptoes to press her lips to his. When she pulled back, his eyes had darkened with an emotion that made her heart race. "Ask me again when this is over," she whispered. "When we're both free." His hands framed her face, gentle despite their strength. "I will," he promised. "And Abigail, be careful today. Whatever happens, whatever Blackwell says or does, remember I'm nearby. I won't let him hurt you." She nodded, drawing strength from his certainty. 1 o'clock, she said. "I'll be ready." At precisely 1 o'clock, Blackwell's carriage, a handsome black conveyance with polished brass fittings, pulled up outside Abigail's lodgings. She stood waiting, a small carpet bag containing her few valuable possessions in one hand. The derringer Zachariah had given her concealed in her pocket. The driver, one of Blackwell's men, helped her into the carriage without speaking. As they pulled away, Abigail caught a glimpse of Zachariah watching from the shadow of a storefront. His nod was barely perceptible, but it steadied her nerves. The carriage didn't head toward the church as she'd expected, but instead turned onto the road leading to Blackwell's house, a large, 2-story structure on the edge of town. Built from lumber milled in his own sawmill, it stood as a testament to his wealth and influence in Weaverville. They pulled up to the front entrance, where Blackwell himself waited on the porch. He changed into a formal black suit with a silver waistcoat, his appearance impeccable as always. "My dear," he greeted her, offering his hand to help her from the carriage. "I'm delighted you've made the sensible choice." "Mr. Blackwell," she replied, accepting his assistance with outward grace while her stomach churned with revulsion. "William, please," he corrected, leading her into the house. "We'll be man and wife in an hour's time." The interior of the house was as impressive as its exterior, polished hardwood floors, expensive furnishings imported from San Francisco, paintings in gilt frames adorning the walls. A testament to wealth, if not taste. "I've had a dress prepared for you," Blackwell said, guiding her toward a staircase. "Mrs. Finch, my housekeeper, will help you change. We leave for the church at 2. "Actually," Abigail said, forcing a shy smile, "I was hoping we might delay just a little longer, perhaps until 4 o'clock. Blackwell's expression hardened. "I thought we agreed on the timing." "We did," she acknowledged quickly. "It's just that, well, it's my wedding day. Even if it is unexpected, I'd like a little time to prepare myself properly, to feel like a bride, not." She gestured to her simple blue dress. "Not like I'm rushing into something." His expression softened slightly. "Of course, a woman's wedding day is important even under these circumstances." He checked his watch. 4 o'clock then, but no later. I have matters to attend to early tomorrow." "Thank you." She touched his arm lightly, suppressing a shudder at the contact. "I want to be a proper wife to you, William. That starts with a proper wedding, even a small one." Pleased by her apparent acceptance, Blackwell summoned Mrs. Finch, a thin, severe-looking woman who appeared to be in her 50s, and instructed her to show Abigail to a guest room where the wedding dress awaited. "I have some business to attend to," he told Abigail. "I'll return by 3:30 to check on your progress." "Business, today?" she asked, feigning disappointment. "Unfortunately, yes, but it will be the last time my work interferes with our time together." He raised her hand to his lips in a gesture that might have been gallant from another man. "Rest assured, my dear, after tomorrow, my attention will be solely devoted to you and our future." After he'd gone, Mrs. Finch led Abigail upstairs to a well-appointed guest room where a cream-colored wedding dress was laid out on the bed. It was surprisingly tasteful, simple lines, good quality silk, with a modest neckline and sleeves that reached her elbows. "Mr. Blackwell said you're to have whatever you need," Mrs. Finch informed her, her tone making it clear she disapproved of the hasty marriage. "There's a bath prepared in the adjoining room. I'll help you with the dress when you're ready." "Thank you, Mrs. Finch." Abigail set down her carpetbag. "Have you worked for Mr. Blackwell long, since he came to Weaverville 3 years ago?" The housekeeper's expression remained neutral. "Will there be anything else, Mrs. Turner?" "No, thank you. I'll call when I'm ready for assistance with the dress." Left alone, Abigail immediately began exploring the room, looking for potential escape routes should things go wrong. The window overlooked a garden with a trellis that might serve as a ladder in an emergency. The lock on the door was simple, easily secured from the inside. The bath was a welcome luxury despite the circumstances. As she soaked in the warm water, Abigail tried to calm her racing thoughts. By now, Zachariah's men would be in position at Cooper's Ridge. Soon, they would have evidence of Blackwell's crimes. All she needed to do was keep him occupied and unsuspicious for a few more hours. After her bath, she dressed in her undergarments and called for Mrs. Finch to help with the wedding gown. The older woman worked efficiently, her fingers deft as she fastened the long row of tiny buttons down Abigail's back. "It fits well," Mrs. Finch observed, adjusting the fall of the skirt. "Mr. Blackwell has a good eye for measurements." The thought of Blackwell assessing her figure so precisely made Abigail's skin crawl, but she forced a smile. "Yes, it's lovely." Mrs. Finch hesitated, then said in a lowered voice, "Mrs. Turner, if I may speak plainly, Mr. Blackwell has certain expectations of a wife, his first Mrs. Blackwell found those expectations challenging. Abigail turned to face the housekeeper. "What do you mean?" "Only that he demands absolute obedience and loyalty." Mrs. Finch's eyes held a warning. "Anything less is not tolerated. Did you know his first wife well?" Abigail asked carefully. "I tended her in her final illness," the older woman replied, her expression grim. "Fever, they said, but fevers don't leave bruises." The confirmation of Zachariah's suspicions sent a chill through Abigail. "Thank you for the warning," she said quietly. "I've said nothing, Mrs. Finch replied firmly, and would deny it if asked. They finished the preparations in silence, By 3 o'clock, Abigail was fully dressed, her hair arranged in an elegant twist adorned with small white flowers from the garden. "You look beautiful," Mrs. Finch acknowledged. "I'll inform Mr. Blackwell when he returns that you're nearly ready." Left alone once more, Abigail paced the room, tension building with each passing minute. Outside, the afternoon sun cast lengthening shadows across the garden. From the window, she could see the road into town empty now except for an occasional rider. At precisely 3:30, the sound of hooves pounding up the drive drew her attention. A rider, dust-covered and slumped in his saddle, pulled his lathered horse to a stop at the front entrance. Even from her window, Abigail could see the man was injured. Blood stained his left sleeve, and he nearly fell as he dismounted. Moments later, shouting erupted from downstairs. Abigail pressed her ear to the door, straining to hear. "Ambushed," the wounded man's voice carried clearly. "They were waiting for us, Mr. Blackwell. Had to be a setup." "What about the gold?" Blackwell's voice tight with fury. "Gone. They took Jenkins and Dowd alive. I barely got away to warn you. And you led them straight here, you fool." A crash suggested Blackwell had overturned furniture in his rage. Abigail backed away from the door, heart pounding. It had worked. The robbery had been foiled, and now Blackwell knew he'd been betrayed. Heavy footsteps on the stairs gave her barely enough warning to compose herself before the door flew open, revealing Blackwell. His carefully groomed appearance had deteriorated. His collar was askew, a smear of what looked like blood stained his silver waistcoat, and his eyes burned with barely controlled fury. "You," he snarled, advancing into the room. "It was you, wasn't it?" Abigail backed away, maintaining distance between them. "I don't know what you're talking about." "My office was broken into the night before last," he said, his voice dangerously quiet now. "Documents taken. And you conveniently disappeared that same night, only to return with a story about spending time with that cowboy." His hand shot out, gripping her arm painfully. "Except he's no cowboy, is he? Pinkerton agent, more like." She wrenched her arm free, backing toward the window. "You're hurting me. And you're not making sense." "Don't play innocent," Blackwell spat. "It's too late for that. The stage was ambushed, but not by my men, by lawmen waiting in ambush. Someone warned them, someone who knew my plans. And you think that was me? A saloon girl." Abigail forced a laugh, though fear clawed at her throat. "What would I know of stage coaches and gold shipments?" For a moment, doubt flickered across his face, then his expression hardened once more. "Perhaps not you alone, but you and your cowboy together. That makes more sense." He advanced slowly, like a predator stalking its prey. "Where are the documents you took from my office, Abigail?" "I didn't take anything." She continued backing away until she felt the windowsill press against her back. "William, you're frightening me." "This isn't how a man should speak to his bride." "There won't be any wedding," he said coldly, "but you will tell me what you know and who you told it to." Her hand slipped into her pocket, fingers closing around the derringer. "There's nothing to tell. Please let me leave." "We can forget this conversation ever happened." "I'm afraid that's not possible." Blackwell reached into his jacket and withdrew a small revolver. "You see, I can't afford to leave witnesses behind when I depart Weaverville. It's unfortunate. I did genuinely admire you, Abigail. We could have had a pleasant life together." Terror threatened to overwhelm her, but Abigail forced herself to remain calm. Zachariah had said he would be watching the house. He would come if she signaled, but how an idea struck her. "Before you do anything rash," she said, "at least allow me one last courtesy. A bride's privilege." Blackwell's eyebrow raised. "And what might that be?" "Let me see my wedding dress in proper light." She gestured to the window behind her. "The sunlight shows the fabric at its best." Curiosity momentarily overrode his anger. "By all means," he said with mocking politeness. "Admire yourself one last time." Slowly, keeping her movements deliberate, Abigail turned to face the window. The garden lay spread before her, seemingly empty. But there, in the shadow of a large oak tree, she caught a glimpse of movement, a figure watching the house. With a swift, decisive motion, She pushed the window fully open and waved her handkerchief, the signal she and Zachariah had agreed upon to indicate imminent danger. "What are you doing?" Blackwell demanded, crossing the room in 2 strides to yank her back from the window. "Who are you signaling to?" "No one," she gasped as his fingers dug into her arm. "I just wanted fresh air." "Liar," he slapped her, hard enough to snap her head to the side. "Your cowboy is out there, isn't he? Waiting to rescue his whore?" The crude insult, coupled with the sting of the blow, ignited something deep within Abigail, not fear but rage. Without conscious thought, she withdrew the derringer from her pocket and pressed it against Blackwell's chest. "Let me go." Each word was clear and distinct. Surprise flickered across his face, followed by amusement. "You won't shoot me, Abigail. You don't have it in you." "Don't I?" Her finger tightened on the trigger. "You murdered your wife. You've threatened and bullied this entire town. You were going to kill me." "Why wouldn't I shoot you?" For a heartbeat, they stood frozen in tableau, Blackwell holding her arm, Abigail with the derringer pressed to his chest. Then a crash from downstairs broke the moment. Blackwell's head turned toward the sound, his grip loosening slightly. Abigail seized her chance, wrenching free and darting toward the door. Blackwell recovered quickly, lunging for her. His fingers caught the back of her dress, tearing fabric as he pulled her backward. "You're not going anywhere," he growled, raising his revolver. The door burst open, revealing Zachariah, gun drawn. "Let her go, Blackwell," he commanded, his voice deadly calm. "It's over." Blackwell's arm snaked around Abigail's waist, pulling her in front of him as a shield. The cold barrel of his revolver pressed against her temple. "Drop your weapon, Mr. King. Or should I say, Agent King?" Zachariah's expression remained impassive, but his eyes met Abigail's, conveying a silent message. "Trust me." "You're surrounded, Blackwell. My men are outside. The sheriff from Reading is downstairs with a warrant for your arrest." "Let her go, and maybe you'll avoid the hangman's noose." "The only one who will be hanging is you," Blackwell snarled, "for interfering in my business." His arm tightened around Abigail's waist. "Now drop your weapon, or I'll decorate this lovely wedding dress with the bride's brains." Time seemed to slow. Abigail, still clutching the derringer at her side, saw Zachariah's gaze flick to her hand, then back to her eyes. A barely perceptible nod, with all her strength she drove her elbow backward into Blackwell's stomach. His grip loosened in surprise, the gun barrel shifting away from her head. In that instant, Abigail twisted and fired the derringer. The small pistol's report was deafening in the confined space. Blackwell staggered backward, his face a mask of shock as he looked down at the spreading red stain on his silver waistcoat. His revolver clattered to the floor as he collapsed against the window frame. "You shot me," he said, disbelief evident in his voice. "You actually shot me." "You left me no choice," Abigail replied, her voice surprisingly steady despite her trembling hands. Zachariah crossed the room in 2 strides, kicking Blackwell's fallen weapon aside before checking his wound. "Not fatal," he announced after a brief examination. "But it'll keep him occupied until the doctor arrives." He looked up at Abigail, concern evident in his eyes. "Are you all right?" she nodded, though tears threatened to spill from her eyes. "I didn't think I could actually do it, shoot someone." "You did what you had to do," Zachariah said gently, rising to take her in his arms. "He would have killed us both." Heavy footsteps on the stairs announced the arrival of reinforcements. 2 men in plain clothes, Pinkerton agents. Abigail assumed entered the room, followed by an official-looking man wearing a sheriff's badge. "William Blackwell," the sheriff announced formally. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit robbery, the murder of Elizabeth Blackwell, and attempted murder of federal agents." As the agents secured Blackwell, Zachariah led Abigail from the room. "It's over," he murmured, his arm supporting her as reactions set in and her knees threatened to buckle. "You're safe now." Downstairs, Mrs. Finch waited in the entrance hall, her usual severe expression replaced by one of satisfaction. "I see Mr. Blackwell's plans have gone awry," she observed dryly. "Indeed they have," Zachariah agreed. You might want to seek new employment, Mrs. Finch. Your employer will be occupied with legal matters for the foreseeable future. I believe I'll return to Sacramento, the housekeeper replied. My sister has been encouraging me to join her there for years. She turned to Abigail. The dress suits you, Mrs. Turner, though perhaps not for the wedding Mr. Blackwell had in mind. Despite everything, Abigail found herself smiling. No, definitely not for that wedding. Outside, the afternoon sun was beginning its descent toward the western mountains. Zachariah's horse waited patiently beside a second mount, a pretty chestnut mare Abigail hadn't seen before. I took the liberty of arranging transportation, Zachariah said, helping her gather the voluminous skirts of the wedding dress. I thought you might want to leave Weaverville sooner rather than later. And go where? She asked, though she already knew her answer. Wherever you'd like, he replied, his eyes serious as they met hers. But I was hoping you might consider coming north with me as we discussed. Not immediately, you'll need to testify at Blackwell's trial first, but after. To Oregon? The prospect was both thrilling and terrifying. A new beginning in a place where no one knew her as Daniel Turner's widow or a saloon girl. I have land there, Zachariah explained. Nothing fancy, a small ranch, good water, decent grazing, room to build. He took her hand, his expression open and vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen before. Room for a future if you want it. With you, she clarified, needing to hear him say it. With me. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object that caught the sunlight, a ring, simple but beautiful, a gold band set with a single pearl. I know it's fast and maybe foolish given all that's happened, but these past few days have shown me something I've never found before, a woman with courage and intelligence to match her beauty. He held out the ring. I'm not asking you to answer now, take the time you need. But when you're ready, if you'll have me, I'd like to make good on the promise of this dress. Abigail looked at the ring, then at the man offering it, a man who had seen her at her worst and most vulnerable, yet still looked at her with admiration and something deeper, something that made her heart race. Ask me, she said softly. Zachariah blinked, momentarily confused. Ask you what? Ask me to marry you, she clarified, a smile spreading across her face despite the tears threatening to spill from her eyes. Properly? Understanding dawned in his expression. Carefully, he knelt on one knee, still holding the ring. Abigail Turner, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Not today, not tomorrow, but when we're both ready to begin that journey together. Without hesitation, she nodded. Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes, I will. The ring slid onto her finger, a perfect fit. Zachariah rose and gathered her into his arms, his kiss conveying all the emotions words couldn't express: relief, joy, promise. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. I should warn you, life with a Pinkerton agent isn't always peaceful. After this week, peaceful might be overrated, she replied with a smile. Besides, I have it on good authority that you're considering retirement. Semi-retirement, he corrected, helping her mount the chestnut mare. Maybe the occasional consultation if my wife approves. His wife might even assist, Abigail said as they rode away from Blackwell's house, leaving behind the life she'd thought was her only option. She's discovered she has a talent for investigation. Zachariah's laugh echoed in the clear mountain air. Heaven help the criminals of Oregon. They won't know what hit them. 3 months later, on a crisp autumn day with golden leaves swirling around their feet, Abigail Turner became Abigail King in a small ceremony on their new ranch in Oregon's Willamette Valley. The witnesses included Zachariah's Pinkerton colleagues, Mrs. Beckett, who had decided Weaverville held too many painful memories, and, surprisingly, Ruby from the Gilded Lily, who had accepted Abigail's invitation to start fresh as her housekeeper and companion. William Blackwell had been convicted of all charges, his testimony at the trial revealing a web of corruption and crime that stretched from California to Nevada. The $500 Zachariah had promised Abigail had been supplemented by a reward from the mining company, providing the newlyweds with a comfortable start to their life together. The ranch was everything Zachariah had described: a sturdy cabin nestled in a valley of tall grass and wildflowers, with mountains rising in the distance, and a clear stream meandering along the eastern border of their property. The cabin itself was small but well built, with windows that caught the morning sun and a stone fireplace that kept away the autumn chill. "Welcome home, Mrs. King," Zachariah said as he carried her across the threshold after the wedding, a tradition he'd insisted on despite her laughing protests. "Home," Abigail repeated, the word taking on new meaning as she surveyed the cabin they would share the beginning of their life together. "It's perfect." As he set her on her feet, Zachariah's arms remained around her waist. "Not yet," he said softly, "but it will be with time and work and love." His eyes, warm and filled with promise, met hers. "Especially love." "Especially love," she agreed, rising on tiptoes to seal the promise with a kiss that spoke of endings and beginnings, of dangers faced and overcome, and of a future built on a foundation stronger than any saloon floor or gold mine. Trust, respect, and a love that had bloomed in the most unlikely of circumstances. Outside, the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, a fitting end to one chapter, and the dawn of a new one for the saloon girl and the Pinkerton agent who had offered her a way out and a ring.